So the name of this conversation is "You are more holistic than you think." And this is not some sort of happy-go-lucky phrase that I'm trying to give you to say, oh, don't worry about it. It's all natural. Everything's fine. Everything's going to work out because you're holistic. It's actually, while it is a huge conversation about your potential, it's also a conversation about responsibility. Because what we tend to do in our society is contrast holistic with normal, when in reality, the contrast to holistic is reductionistic, right? And that's something we're going to start off with right there as a definition of terms, so you understand where we're coming from. Because we talk about, oh, you have the health food section of the grocery store, and you have the regular food section of the grocery store. And you have the healthy lifestyle, and you have the regular lifestyle. And we have this idea that healthy and holistic and natural is somehow like up here or over there, depending on who you are. And that everything else is just normal in the way it's supposed to be, or the general approach to life. When in reality, holistic, if you really understand what it means, is the central focus and form and function of all of life. Everything else is a detraction from that. So the word holistic, when applied to healthcare, means something like you're focusing on the whole person, the whole well-being of all facets of that person's life. So physical, emotional, mental, social, spiritual. That's a holistic approach, to be concerned about everything that's going on with that person, or you, or the world, or whatever. The word holism, from which that comes, means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. What does that mean? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That means that you cannot break the thing down, in this case, you and me, human beings. You can't break us down into parts and still make as much sense out of the parts as you can out of the whole person. Any more than you can treat the parts and help the whole person live a healthy life, right? So a car, for instance, you can break a car apart, take the pieces apart, and if the engine's broken, you can fix the engine. Put the car back together and the car should function. If you have a flat tire, you can take the whole car apart, just fix the tire, put the whole car back together, and the car would function properly. In fact, you don't even need to take the car apart. You just fix the tire and the car will work. As humans, we don't work that way. We're what you call irreducible. You cannot reduce a human being from the wholeness that it is. You have a personality, you have organs that function, you have thoughts, you have a sense of identity, you have relationships, you have emotions, you have experience, you have a history, you have a future. All of that is essential in understanding who you are and how you function and how you should take care of yourself. To reduce ourselves is to say, well, I'm going to live however I want. I'm going to eat McDonald's, I'm not going to exercise, I'm going to sit in front of a computer screen all day long, binging on TV shows for decades on end. And when I get heart disease, I'll take heart medication, or maybe have heart surgery, and then I'll be fine, right? That approach is a complete divergence from the actual way that the body functions. Now you can live, I'm not saying you have to live a holistic life. You can live a reductionistic life. You can ignore everything that's going on in your relationships. You can ignore everything that's going on in your body, and you can just take care of the bare minimum of the things that concern you and just get through life waiting for it to be over. And a lot of people do. In fact, everyone who's listening to this knows, probably the majority of people that they've met in their lives seem to live in this way to some extent or another. So why doesn't that work? Why can't you just ignore your relationships and your emotions and your thoughts and just take care of a physical ailment and expect to be as healthy as possible? And the reality is this, it's very simple. It's so simple. You are created in a holistic fashion. You are holistic. That's what I say when I mean, or that's what I mean when I say that you're more holistic than you think. That's an understatement. You are completely holistic. You are only holistic. You are not anything else. So you can't take that term and put it off to the side and assume that it's just for people who are into that sort of thing. Or it's just for times in your life when everything else is working out. When everything else is fine, then we can focus on the holistic approach. But if something's going wrong, we need to take that other approach where we reduce the person down into parts and treat that part as if it's broken, right? That is actually the common function of our modern healthcare system, is to wait until something's broken so that we can fix it with drugs or surgery or something of that sort. right? Or even some sort of alternative approach, right? So we say that medicine and healthcare that are not primary are alternative and complementary. Alternative and complementary to what? Alternative and complementary to this reductionistic view of health. So if you want to live in that world where you want to try to reduce your body down into parts and pieces, so you don't have to worry about catering to your emotional well-being. You don't have to worry about getting your relationships in order and your spiritual understanding of who you are as a human being and what your soul is up to. If you don't want to worry about that stuff and you just want to focus on enjoying what you enjoy in life, enjoying your hobbies and getting through life with as little, inconvenience as possible, right? To not be bothered by this complexity, you can do that. And then your primary approach to health is going to be to wait until something breaks and then use either what we call allopathic or contemporary medicine or alternative and complementary therapies to try to treat that thing that's going wrong inside of you. The other way to look at it is that there is no alternative or complementary therapy, because the only thing that would complement, that means that it's something less than what is actually important for you. It's less than what is actually trying to make the change that you want to make. If we see ourselves as holistic, right, one whole being, where the whole of you is greater than the sum of your parts, right? Because you cannot break yourself down into a liver and a past and a relationship and take care of these things separately. Your job affects your physical well-being. Your relationships affect your longevity. Your emotional experience and how free you are with allowing yourself to experience your emotions and not binding them up and stuffing them under a rug is directly related to how well your organs are going to function and whether or not you're going to have chronic illness later in your life. All these things are so interconnected with each other. So earlier in this conversation, I mentioned that this is not a happy-go-lucky kind of idea, that you're holistic, so don't worry about it. Everything's going to work out fine because it's all natural. Well, gosh, look out in nature. It's raining right now and it's kind of cold. I wouldn't want to be dropped off in the middle of the wilderness with no provisions and no idea of where I was and just to live in nature. That would be incredibly difficult because nature would swallow me whole, right? So not to say that because we're holistic, all of a sudden life is supposed to be effortless. It's a huge responsibility with an even bigger potential for success. Because if we understand how to take care of ourselves holistically, then we not only get to get out of pain and out of discomfort, we get to create an amazing, fulfilling, well-rounded life where all of our parts, right, the holistic approach is to take into account all of the person's attributes, their physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual being. All of those parts get to work in harmony together because the holistic you can only be functioning well if all of those parts are tended to. You cannot take them apart. You cannot treat them as individual. You cannot treat them as separate and less than the whole. That's the reductionistic approach, to reduce ourselves down to a list of parts and pieces. So what does this look like to live this holistic life? What I'm talking about is when you have a physical ailment, that you don't just look at the knee, right? Even from, let's say as a chiropractor, I'm looking at the body, I'm looking at the physical body. I'm looking at the spine and the nervous system. I'm looking at the joints and the muscles and the ligaments and the fascia and all of these different levels of the physical part of you. Even on a very physical level, if your knee is bothering you, chances are that your other knee or your ankle or your hip or your low back or all these other parts of you are also compensating and functioning or dysfunctioning in unison together in some sort of out of harmony rhythm where they're not communicating properly. They're not functioning with each other properly, right? So even on a very physical level, the whole musculoskeletal system, right, that's our meat and bones, the whole functional unit of the human being cannot be broken down into one joint or another joint and treated as such and expected to be as successful as it would be if you treated the whole physical body together. But you can expand that and start stacking these layers. So I can tell you that so often when people come in with chronic physical pain, and when I say so often, I actually mean every single time someone comes in with chronic physical pain, there is also an error or some sort of stressor in that person's relationship with their job, their relationship with their family or their spouse or their friends, or there's an issue in their relationship to their own emotions and the inability or unwillingness to feel certain emotions, whether in the present or in the past, right? It could be an ongoing relationship error in the present where we're stuck in a mind loop or stuck in a resistance to our own emotions. Or it can be a reaction to a past stressor that's over in time, but persists in the body as a neurological pattern of stress and dysfunction. Now, this is the bread and butter of what we do in this office, is help people free their nervous system from these patterns of distress and dysfunction and resume that natural healing process, which is why what we do is a holistic intervention, right? That's why when people come in and they lay on the table and they get what we call chiropractic or craniosacral therapy, it's a very physical healthcare intervention on the surface, but people experience changes in their self-awareness, changes in their digestion, or in their emotional relationship with themselves or others, their anxiety, depression, right? This the way the brain is functioning with sleep rhythms and thought patterns and sense of self and sense of self-worth and identity and focus. All of these parts are anchored, inseparable from the physical body. That is a holistic view of the body. And a holistic view of life is to say, if I want to live in a super healthy, fulfilled, satisfying state of being, not necessarily happy all the time, right? Not happy-go-lucky where you don't worry about anything anymore and everything is just free and easy, but satisfying and fulfilling and complete, then you have to understand yourself and your life as a holistic equation, where you cannot separate out and ignore elements of yourself and expect the whole to function properly. Let's blow this picture wide open and look at it from a societal point of view. Right now, we're concerned about, we're a year now into concern over a virus. As if this one thing is somehow the culprit in creating distress in our world and causing pain and illness and suffering. When in reality, if we continue to look at a single genetic sequence being transferred around the population of humanity as the sole cause of our distress and dysfunction and illness and death, then we will never free ourselves from the ongoing cycle of victimization from some element of nature, some element of our circumstance, right? And that's really what it is. We're seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance. That if only this circumstance could be rejected and pushed off to the side and buried once and for all, then we could get back to living the way we want to, that we are used to, right? That's no different than saying, if only I could take this knee and bury it, this pain that I'm feeling, and eliminate it and get it out of my life, then I could go back to being happy. Really, were you happy and satisfied before that? Did you feel like you were complete before that knee started to ache? Do you feel like humanity was complete before this new virus started to threaten our sense of safety and stability? Now, of course, if you're honest and you look at it from an objective standpoint, you'd say the answer is no. Because we're living in a world where we disregard the interconnectedness of ourselves and our environment and our relationships and our sense of identity. We disregard the fact that we're separating ourselves from nature and that we're wasting resources in an increasing rate, and that we're becoming sicker chronically and acutely as a population over time, even in the Western world, even in America, where we spend more on healthcare than any other country in the world. That we can look at these different facets of our culture, that we're divided as a people, that we give all this belief and trust away to the politicians and the famous and the elite and the pharmacological gurus who live in the laboratory making these amazing cures for us, that we give away all this power to others, and that we ignore the fact that we're separate, and an increasing sense of separation from our emotional state of well-being and our connection to the earth and our connection to each other. So on a global scale and on a nationwide scale, the holistic conversation applies even more than it does in the individual. Well, that's unfair to say. They're equal. They're inseparable. We as individual units, we as individual human beings are undeniably holistic. And we're irreducible and inseparable from all the different facets of who we are that make us up. And we as a population are irreducible as this holistic body of individuals that must come to terms with our emotional relationship to our own, oh my gosh, hang out on Facebook for 5 minutes and you're going to see all sorts of emotional turmoil and mental confrontation and cultural values diverging. And if we ignore that and we think that our problems and the threat of circumstance bearing down on us from nature is the result of its own reduced, separated out cause, like the cause of our distress is the coronavirus, and we don't see that we've created a population of lack of robustness, a reduced down population to pieces and parts that cannot function independently because we don't see it as the whole that it is. So we're ignoring the fact that our food is becoming worthless for us, as our soil becomes dead and our microbiome becomes disrupted, and our interweb of communication that the natural world has in place for us, just as the interweb of communication in our own bodies, that is the microbiome, and the integrity of the communication of the nervous system becomes disrupted, everything starts to fall apart. And you can't just go in and take out the nervous system and stitch it back together and expect things to not only resume the way they were functioning, but somehow come to a sense of completeness without addressing every other attribute of who you are. Just like you cannot add a new cocktail of pharmaceutical intervention to humanity and expect some level of completeness to arise from the ashes automatically when everything else has been ignored. So this conversation of you are holistic, you are more holistic than you think, to the extent that you are completely holistic, that we are not reductionistic, that we cannot separate ourselves out and expect wholeness to ever arise, let alone true health and well-being. That if we continue down this road of thinking that we can separate ourselves out and ignore the interconnectedness of who we are as individuals, our personal relationships with our friends and family, our role as contributing human beings in society and in our culture, if we ignore all of those different layers of who we are and we wait for something to go wrong so we can take that part, isolate it out, and try to fix or eliminate or demonize that one thing, or wait for someone to come in and save us from this one thing, ignoring the rest, then we are doomed to repeat this cycle of this reductionistic curse of being plowed time and time again by these circumstantial threats that seem to come in from somewhere else to threaten what we otherwise are pretending was our safety and our stability. When in reality, if you say, if I could change this one thing about myself, this pain that I'm feeling, if I could eliminate the pain, if I could eliminate the threat, if I could eliminate the virus, would we then return to a state of completeness that we somehow had before this threat arose? And the answer, of course, is no, because we got ourselves into the stress and the struggle because we took a reductionistic approach to our own lives and to our collective existence as humans, when in reality, we are holistic, and it must be a holistic approach that we take to not only understanding why things have gone awry and how to intervene in our own lives, but to ever even assume that we could achieve a state of completeness and satisfaction and fulfillment and interconnectedness that will inevitably require a complete revamping of the way that we see ourselves and our health in our world. That's the holistic nature of who you are, as contrasted to the reductionistic nature of who we like to think we are often, according to the ways we employ healthcare and disease care and our assumption of how our world works. So it's not that holistic is up here, over there, somewhere else for those fancy, healthy people to take care of, or for when things are all going well and everything else is fine, then we can worry about being holistic. It doesn't work that way. It's not holistic and normal, or any more than it is health food and normal food. Health and holism and interconnectedness and completeness are the natural state. What we experience when we're in distress and disease and dysfunction and fragmentation in our lives, that is the altered state. And if we treat it as if we can fix that alone and leave the rest as it is, then we're going to repeat the cycle till the end of time. So there you have it. That's it. That's the conversation for today. We're going to keep stacking these conversations. We try to get in at least once a month of some sort of off-the-cuff, impromptu conversation about some element of health and well-being and our identity as humans that I believe if we were to shift a little bit towards a different perspective, we would see a massive improvement in our sense of well-being and fulfillment in life. So any comments, questions, or ideas or interests that you'd like me to address in the future, please leave them in the comments, send us a message. I'm excited to continue this conversation with you guys, and hope you have a great day. Take care.